All right, can we hear it now? Now all of a sudden it doesn't want to find my microphone. There we go. All right, now you should be able to hear me. Um, been having technical difficulties sometimes. It's only when I start to go live, but anytime I practice it, it always seems to work. But then the moment I go live, boom, it just doesn't recognize the microphone anymore. All right, so um, since you couldn't hear me before, I'm Rick with Zeroed In podcast. So these are the beyond the episodes. So if you've already seen episodes 0 through 4, great. And we'll kind of recap those. If not, if you're new to listening in, go ahead, drop some comments in there. You'll be able to see the comment section. Go ahead, drop some comments in there. Throw any questions you have. Basically, so I'll just kind of recap. Why am I doing Zeroed In, and what does that mean? So after a long, long career, 35 years in public service, I figured, you know what, I would be able to take, this is kind of like a twofold event. So what I'm doing is I'm creating basically a bio documentary, my own documentary for my own family. But at the same time, for those that I've actually interacted with, worked with, grew up with, gone through some hard times with, some great times, just something that we can collaborate on, and I can kind of share stories about those that, who I've met in passing throughout my life, but at the same time, weren't there to experience some of the other times that I've had as well. And also, eventually, as these episodes go on, I want to be able to bring people on that I've interacted with during these episodes. So I would love to be able to have you on as a guest, and we can talk about some of those stories that some of those experiences that we've shared, whether good, bad, or indifferent, because we know we've been through a lot of those times as well. But just kind of, bring everybody up to speed. So we started with episode 0, which was why I was doing this, and I kind of just explained that in a nutshell. And then 1 went on to episode 1 was, I believe, where I kind of grew up as a kid. I basically compressed pretty much 18 years into one episode. I know I couldn't capture it all, but like I said, I would love to be able to have those on that were able to. I'd be able to, that way, for those I shared, experiences with growing up during that time. If this microphone keeps cutting out for whatever reason, I have no idea. But I'd love to be able to share those times with you. So I think episode 1 was me going through 18 years And then episode 2, I believe, was during basic training and why I made that decision to even join the Army and then get through basic training. Episode 3, I believe, was Fort Lewis, which was my first duty station. And then episode 4 was Alaska. So those are, even though those seem like pretty quick episodes, some of them were only like 40 minutes, others were just over an hour. There's a lot to compress in that time, and obviously I can't cover it all. So that's why I wanted to go with the live AMAs. So that way, if you did watch the episodes and you say, "Hey, Rick, did you do this? Because I didn't hear that in there," or "Hey, can you expound on this for me?" Because I also feel this is also not just a like a biography type platform, but it's also something that if you've had a shared experience, even if it wasn't with me, we can talk about it and maybe we can figure out, hey, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, what went right in your life during that time, or what were you going through during that time. So it's kind of like just feeding off of shared experiences, and I kind of want to build a platform for that. So, and I felt with, like I said, over 35 years in public service, I wanted to, and now building my own company, at that time, I figured there's a lot of experience I could share with people, and some that we can look back on together and be like, man, I remember that time, or whatever. So, but I kind of want to hit that. Like I said, if you're just joining in, throw throw your comments out there, throw some questions out there. Would love to be able to hear from you. I've gotten a few questions already. Somebody asked, even though I mentioned it in one of the episodes, they said one of the questions was, did I pursue the Army because I was so patriotic? Initially, no, that's not why I joined. It was basically because I really didn't have any other direction to go. Kind of like we've all kind of been given like that path. You're either on a path that your family kind of put forward for you, or you were on this dead set, hey, I got to do this path or whatnot. Like I said, all through high school, all I wanted to do was play baseball. I didn't want to go to college. And once I figured out that, hey, I wasn't going to make a living, or wasn't going to be able to pursue my baseball career without going to college, at least back during that time, I kind of gave that up, and I had to figure out which direction I was going to go. So, so that's why I ended up going down. I looked at the Army. I looked at a couple other places, and like I said, once there was a buddy of mine in high school. His family was, or somebody in his family, I believe it was his uncle, was in the Army, and was a Ranger at one point. And then I didn't know anything about it, so I went down to the recruiter's office and asked him about it. And if you look at episode 1, you'll be able to see everything I put into that, and how I was able to live through and make those decisions. And the patriotism piece came after I had joined and understood I was actually doing something greater than myself. So as we all grow up together, as you grow up from 0 to 18, for the most of us, I would say general John Q. public, we typically, we're not really kind of focused on something that's greater than ourselves. Even though our families try to inculcate that in us, saying, hey, follow this, you want to be able to follow this moral compass or whatnot, and just be a good person in general. And then you kind of have those defined paths that you're probably going to go down. And for me, joining the service at first wasn't about patriotic. It was about doing something with my life. And it was only then in basic training is when I started to understand that, oh my goodness, there's so much more, there's so much greater than what I just went through in my first 18 years of life. And it really made me proud to be able to serve amongst other like-minded individuals to work towards a common goal. And that common goal for me and for the guys I was working with was the protection of not only each other, but for the greater good of the country. So that patriotism came in a little bit, I'd say probably a few months into my service. So, and I started to realize that it wasn't the day we were getting smoked at the first day of basic training. That definitely wasn't it. As a matter of fact, that was probably the opposite of patriotism. We were all thinking, man, what the hell did we just get into? But at the same time, that started to grow. There was a small flame there that was lit in basic. And then as I progressed on into service, then that flame grew stronger and stronger. And that only grows stronger once you start putting yourself around like-minded individuals. You start seeing missions that are way greater than yourself. You start, accumulating accountability and responsibility. And for me, at least, it made the major change in my personality, my character, and everything else. So, for those who served with me throughout different periods, all the way from as a kid growing up until even just recently, we've probably seen ourselves grow. There were guys that I've served with that, we were hoodlums at some point. But at the same time, we, going through shared experiences, there's a lot that we grew up on. So, we may have thought each other were class clowns back when we were doing some hard stuff and whatnot. But I bet if we talk to each other now, we'll be able to see how well and how far we've come and grown. So, and that's another reason why. Saying connection lost. Another reason why, I wanted to kind of do this as well. So that way we can have those and bring up those shared experiences. So, and take a drink of my cocoa at night. All those years of drinking coffee, I could still, even today, I think I had a cup of coffee the other night before bed and fell right asleep. So it's just one of the things that the military and other, even law enforcement, got me into. So, or it kind of inbred in me to where your body just got used to it over time. So anyway, so kind of getting into, a few of the things, we wrapped up with Alaska on the episode 4. Right now I'm working on episode 5, and I'll kind of give you some snippets on that. So episode 5 is going to be broken down into 2 parts, episode 5A and 5B. And what those consist of are, if you watch the previous episodes when I left Alaska and I re-enlisted for the first time, I now went on to Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg being down in North Carolina, it was like the center of the universe for anybody that's in the airborne community. That's what we used to call the mothership. However, I went from traditional infantry line unit to now going into a totally different realm of infantry tactics, and was long-range surveillance. This was I spent about 4.5 years in that unit, the one at Fort Bragg, in long-range surveillance unit. And that was, if you noticed in my previous episodes, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but in my previous episodes, I was trying to find where I could fit in. Even when I was growing up, I talked about the time when I was growing up, I think it was in episode 1. I was growing up as a kid, and I really didn't have anybody to. I really didn't feel like I fit in anywhere, and but now here I was going on. I was at this now came into 4 years now in service, and I finally found a unit that I absolutely found my own place. This was a unit where long range surveillance. It's a unit. It was totally different than a regular line unit. The mission set was different. Let me kind of pull up some snippets from what I'm writing for the episode 5. So one of the things I'll share with you is, and I kind of wrote this for episode 5, is, in that unit, everybody there, everyone on that team, you operate in 6-man teams. So you're no longer in 10 to 12-man squads with 2 fire teams, and then 3 squads in a platoon, 4 squads in a platoon, 3 line squads, and 1 weapon squad, which was your machine gun squad. However, this here was a totally different mission set. In an infantry platoon, you're out there your job is to, find, fix, and finish. We used to call the 3 Fs, right? So find, fix, and finish. Just basically destroy. And that's it. I mean, you would find the enemy, fixate on them, get your units aligned on them, and finish. Just move through with the violence of action. So, and just destroy everything on the target. And that's the way an infantry unit's designed. However, what I got into was reconnaissance and surveillance. Totally different mission sets, totally different responsibilities, and the amount of responsibility that you're given in a long-range surveillance unit or any type of reconnaissance unit is way greater than any responsibility that you're going to see in any line infantry unit. And I'll take that to the grave with me. Some people will argue, but here I'll give you some reasons why. So if you don't understand, if you didn't serve at all and you're trying to figure out, hey, Rick, what are you talking about? So we operated in 6-man teams. And to kind of put this into context is one of the things I wrote is, for the civilian population to kind of to relate is imagine a 6-man team operating ahead of a larger force. So if you're taking that large infantry unit, right, and now you're taking a 6-person team and you're putting them way out there in front of friendly forces, being unseen, trying to go undetected into enemy territory and be able to push back through, communication channels, all different types of communication channels, back to those friendly forces while avoiding contact with the enemy. So get in and get in undetected, gather information undetected, get out undetected. That was very tough. But it may sound like, Rick, that's just three things, get in, get information, get out. Okay. But there's so much more that goes into that. And just kind of put things into perspective. So in an infantry unit, you've got the team itself, so for a LURS unit, the team itself must be at near expert level proficiency in land nav, operations order processing, camouflage techniques, link up operations. We're talking both friendly and partisan, call for fire operations, trying to call in, whether it be aerial gunfire, naval gunfire, or even just, artillery fire. You have to be proficient at calling those in, and those are different formats that you're going to be utilizing. And you have to understand the capabilities of those weapon systems. And then also you got to figure the terrain. Is so much that goes into it. And also you're talking about specialized infiltration techniques, because each team or each platoon that we had, when I first got there, we had 3 platoons, and inside of those platoons, there were 6 teams. There was 2 water teams, water infiltration teams. There was 2 free fall teams, and there were 2 what they used to call ruck teams. Okay, these are just your all-purpose people that would just find a way other than water infiltration or free fall, halo or free fall. And my point about the whole thing is there's so many nuances and specializations in this unit than there was from a regular infantry unit that I was used to, that made me feel like I fit in. This is where I belong. This is everybody who comes to work gives 110% every single day. And not to say they don't in a regular unit. I'm just saying that's where I found my home, because this was a volunteer unit, and if you messed up, you were gone. You could be sent out. The commander just writes a letter and you're gone. So everybody came to work making sure that they gave 110% every single day, whether it be during PT in the morning or just during the regular duties during the day, missions, whether you're supporting missions or you're on mission, because sometimes you're rotating cycles. It was just a phenomenal time to be. And I'm going to talk about all that in episodes 5A and B. So, and how specialized that unit was and why I miss it so much to this day. So out of 20 years of military service, there's 4.5 years that I thought were my favorite years that I served in. And it was because of the culture and the guys that I served with. And it was awesome. And not to mention, but the opportunities, the training opportunities, the school opportunities, that you got to be able to, we had both the luxury and the pleasure and it was just based off of the mission set. We were able to get these type of courses to go to that you would never get in a normal infantry unit. So, and I think once again, that was one of those things that kind of helped build the camaraderie with everybody and made everybody tight, and wanted to compete against one another. So that was another thing for me is, when you saw some of the other episodes that I had, you probably felt like, man, likes to compete a whole lot. Well, that's why I found this unit fascinating. So, because everybody there was competing against each other, whether it be for promotion or for the next course or the next school, or even just, if we're going on a 10-mile run. So yeah, those are coming up. So when I first got there, my team leader at the time, he was in phenomenal shape. He was in his 40s. And back then, and he was in phenomenal shape. He played soccer, and every single Monday, and for those, if you were in my team during that time and you're watching, you remember the LSD runs. And we're not talking LSD as in drugs. We're talking long, slow distance. That's what he used to call them. He used to call them long, slow distance, but they were anything but slow. So when I first got there, one of my first runs that I went on with the team was a 10-mile run. We had a 10-mile loop. Since we were positioned down by what's now, we were down in the World War II barracks. So anybody's familiar with Fort Bragg, we're down there by Pike Field, where the pass and review is every single year for the 82nd. And so if you're coming in, if you're watching, hey, drop some comments in here, throw some comments in, and I'd love to be able to talk with you. Please do. I'm just sitting here rambling, so I'd love to be able to, if you got any questions or anything, or you want to be able to bring anything up, I'd love to be able to talk about it. But so we were down in the World War II barracks. We were down there by Pike Field, like I said, and back then it was called Pope Army or Pope Air Force Base before it became Pope Army Airfield. And so we were down there. So what we would do is we'd start a run from the company area down there. And we had a route that went down McKellar's Road all the way out to the Delta compound. And then down, I forget the name of the road that also paralleled the Delta compound. And then we went out to, I believe it came out to Manchester Road. And then you took Manchester all the way back. It was a 10-mile loop. And man, we used to go on those every single Monday. So if you're partying hard on the weekend, like we did, you're out partying it up, by the time Monday morning comes around, you're not really feeling so great because of all the additives that you put in your body over the weekend. And so, man, next thing you know, Monday morning, boom, we're going on that run. Or we would go on a ruck run, or we'd go on, we used to call it a terrain run, where our commander used to love to do that. So we'd form up as a company, and then next thing you know, commander would take us on these runs where you would start off on the road, but then you'd take off and he'd run through the woods, and you got an entire company running through the woods. So it was pretty crazy. But when I first got there, to Fort Bragg, to that unit, before it was called, so that unit was Foxtrot Company 51st Infantry. We used to call it Fund 51, and I'll talk about that in the episode. However, when I first got there, it was called, it was Delta Company 519th MI Battalion. So when I got there, we were attached to an MI battalion, our military intelligence battalion. And it was a little different because, we didn't do anything with the battalion. We were like our own entity. And what's funny is, since we were Delta Company, so there's 4 companies in that battalion, and we were the largest one. We had over 100, and I think at one point we had 180 people in that company. I believe. I think we almost hit 180 at one point. Could have been 160. Not sure. But if Mike Moore, who's ever watches this, he'll be able to correct me since he was our first sergeant at the time. And but the other companies only had like maybe 20 people, 30 people. So we'd be out there at, battalion formation. And here we are, like you got 160, 180 guys standing out there. And then these in one company, and then you got these little companies with 20 some odd people. So, and then eventually a couple months after I got there, we redesignated to Foxtrot Company 51st Infantry. So, and that's where our unit was mainly, we were the core asset for all of 18th Airborne Corps. And 18th Airborne Corps consisted of the units at Fort Bragg, Fort Bragg, Fort Campbell, the 10th Mountain Division, which is, God, I'm drawing a blank now. Anyway, and then I think it was first ID, might have been, I don't know, down in Georgia. So very huge, big core asset. And our company was the premier reconnaissance asset for the entire Corps. So it was pretty cool. So since we were there at Fort Bragg, and the Corps commander's office was there at Fort Bragg as well, we used to call the flagpole. When I first, like I said, when I first got there, General Hugh Shelton was he was the 18th Airborne Corps commander. And when I talked about some of the responsibilities that we had in the unit, and one of them, you had to know the orders process inside and out. And the orders process came down to your planning going on your missions. And your plans that you were doing had to be so thorough, all the way down to the left, right, left of your 6-man team, of where you're going, how you're going to do it, at every step, every phase of the operation. And so there was quite a few times where General Shelton himself, and then as years went on, subsequent commanders as well, would come in and we would brief them. So you would never see that in a line infantry unit, is a young PFC, young private first class, or young specialist briefing a general on tactical operations, on how we're going to execute this, and then talking about turning on and turning off fire areas, no fire areas, restricted fire areas, and how to be able to understand that. But in this unit, that's what we had. So you'd have the general come in along with, of course, his brass and his entourage. And, it was kind of nerve-wracking at first when you got that, you got the 2 stars or 3 stars of a rank sitting up there on the collar, and you're briefing them for the first time on your mission, and you're trying to win their approval to actually go on the mission. So, it's kind of do or die whether or not you planned accordingly. And, because we would go into, typically planning sessions would be somewhere between 48 and 72 hours, depending on the size of the target, where you're going, the target packet, the package that's going to be involved. If it's localized, we probably did a 48-hour, maybe a 72-hour planning sequence, which we were isolated in just one planning bay or planning area. And us in a 6-man team, we would just sit there and we would be able to get briefings from our intel section, our operations section, or whatnot, and we would request all sorts of information about the target, the area surrounding the target. We would get our aerial assets would come in and meet with us. So if we were going in by helicopter, the actual pilots that are going to fly that mission would come in and sit down with us, and we would plan flight routes. And then also we would show them where our restricted fire areas were, or no fire areas were, or how long we needed them to what we call logger in the area. So when a team gets inserted, typically the helicopters will be able to push off somewhere about 6, 7, up to 10 Ks away. 10 kilometers, I should say, for those that, when I say Ks, they will go into like what's called a logger. They're not going to just hover, but they're going to float around away from where they landed us, so where we got put in. So that way, for about 10 to 15 minutes after we get off, make our insertion, those things are, if we make contact anywhere, we can call them up on the radio and say, hey, look, we need to meet you at, LZ such and such, landing zone such and such. Or if there's a spies master on that bird, somebody that's going to be able to throw a rope down, and then you just hook on with your body harness, hook on to that snap link. And then next thing you know, if you've ever seen the videos of guys being strapped to a rope and pulled up by a helicopter, that's a spies, special purpose insertion extraction technique. So we used to train on that religiously. And then, so that way, if you made contact within that first 10 to 15 minutes, those birds are still at your disposal to be able to help get you out of there and get you extracted in a timely manner. Or if you get into a firefight somewhere, maybe they can be able to provide. So if they have door gunners, they can come and maybe help provide some type of cover while we extract and get to a safer place to be able to be extracted. So that was the type of stuff that, we had to, even when I was talking about the younger guys in the team, that you had to understand that, like, inside and out. So that way, if you were the lone person, like I said, if 5 guys on the team got wiped out and you got a private that's left, that private needs to know what communication channels he needs, what signaling that he needs, and where he needs to be able to go. So, and then if we gathered any information, he better have the information on him, so that way he can take it back to get debriefed. So it was, what a great time that was. Like I said, that was my favorite 4.5 years in service. And I'll go more in depth on that when I get into the episodes. But like I said, throw your comments in here, please. Any questions you have, about any of the episodes or anything in life general. Like I said, I built this AMA piece not just for me to tell stories, but that way we can also like kind of have shared, if we have shared experiences, life experiences. Hey, what did you go through here? And, how did that help you? To me, this is like kind of like a healing platform for those as well. So, because damn sure I needed it over the past, many years. So, but yeah, if you're watching, like I said, throw some comments in there. They'll come up on my screen, and you'll be able to see them. I want to definitely keep on doing these. I've been, I knew I haven't done it in quite a few weeks. That's because I've been super busy. I've got a lot of stokes, or a lot of, what do you call them? Irons in the fire. So doing a lot of things right now between the Zeroed In podcast, building my own company, and we'll get to that later on, cybersecurity company. So right now I'm working on a product that's taken a ton of time in my day and night. So if you've seen some of my posts about it, you definitely understand. So, but I definitely want to get on here. I'd love to be able to have people get on here and, just come on and let's chat, let's talk. That's when I get my microphone working. If I get it working, typically it takes me about 5 minutes into it to figure out, oh my goodness, my microphone wasn't working. What else? Let me see. Yeah, so episode 4, like I said, that was Alaska. Alaska was awesome. The unit I was in, it was not awesome, but what was awesome were the experiences that I had, not just with the military, but also um, outside of like just wearing the uniform. So, going and seeing different places in Alaska, experiencing the wildlife, experiencing the terrain, experiencing the heat, believe it or not. And I think I brought that up in episode 4 was um, when I first arrived there, it was in July. It was July '92, and when you first arrive, you arrive in Anchorage, and but either way, it was still daylight at 2 a.m., 1 a.m., 2 a.m. It's still daylight. It's not something that your body is just kind of accustomed. You don't get accustomed, or I wasn't accustomed to at that point. Um, I remember that first weekend just went by so quickly because that nocturnal clock inside of you is just like, hey, is this working? Hello, you need to go to sleep. Hey, it just didn't seem like, you just didn't want to sleep at all. So, but then I spent about a week there in Anchorage and then went up to Fort Wainwright in Fairbanks. And I'll tell you, that was some time. So if anybody, anybody here who has kids, you tell them, Santa's from the North Pole. I've actually been to North Pole, North Pole, Alaska. It's actually right down the street from the military base there at Fort Wainwright, which is in Fairbanks. So, which is down the street from Fairbanks, North Pole, Alaska. And it's funny because you got the big Santa house. It's decorated all year, and it's like a big drive-through resort type thing. It's crazy. So it's like Christmas all year long. But yeah, so in the summer up there, it would get in the 90s, but it would be dry. So if you live in the Southwest right now, as you know, the summers up there are basically kind of the same thing in Fairbanks. It's very dry heat, but it'd still get up there. So we'd be there in the summertime and it would be 90 degrees, 94 degrees, but it wouldn't feel like it just because there was no humidity right there. But the winters though, forget about it. Those things were they were off the chain, to say the least. The winters, it was an experience. From the military perspective, when we'd go into the field, there would be no there was no coming back to the barracks. When you went out to the field, you stayed in that cold, and that cold would be down 30, 40, 50 below, and you'd be operating out there. The good thing is you have the requisite type of equipment to be able to deal with that, but you'd be out there in 20, 30, 40 below, 50 below sometimes. And what was beautiful was the what do you call it? The Northern Lights. Man, but the colder it got, so everybody typically sees the Northern Lights in videos and stuff like that, and they're nice and green and they whip around the sky, which they're beautiful in person. However, the colder it gets, the more vivid they become and the more colorful they become. So you knew it was going to be super cold when those things started turning purple. So if you started getting purple Northern Lights, man, you knew it was going to be a cold night. And I remember there was quite a few nights, I think I told you before. Yeah. Paul Moore, what's up, man? Yep, like a whoopee. Yeah. Good to see you, brother. Damn. Stephen Paulmore, man, in the questions. That's awesome. So Paul Moore, man, I served with him at Fort Bragg. That'll be coming up in a later Fort Bragg episode. I got to go through a few episodes first before I get there. But Paul Moore, he was one of my awesome guys. Man, we had such a great time. with the team that we had there. I loved this guy. I remember blowing my knee out. One of the reasons why I had knee surgery wasn't because. Let me fix my microphone here. So my microphone just changes like on its own. But anyway, so yeah, Paul Moore, I can kind of give you that story here. We're going to fast forward and be on episodes I haven't even gone to yet. But it was funny. So Stephen, he was, God, I loved all the guys I served with. And but Paul Moore, man, we were getting ready to go to a course, and I remember I went with Paul Moore. We were doing land navigation, and so we were trying to get guys more and more proficient at it. And I remember we were out there walking, and I remember stepping in. So at Fort Bragg, whenever they do the controlled burns, all those pine trees, when they burn, they all fall down, they take them out or whatnot. And when they burn, of course, it's going to burn that root into the ground, which is going to leave a nice little hole in the ground. So I want to say it was probably getting towards the evening, and I think I was walking with Paul Moore, and we were going from one point to another, and I didn't see it, and I ended up stepping into one of those old burnt out root holes from a tree, and that's where I ended up tearing the cartilage in my knee. And I knew I blew it out, but I just didn't know how bad it was at the time. And but yeah, so Paul Moore, I'm glad you jumped on here, man. And Ox, okay, good to see you on here, brother. Ox is another guy I served with as well, but in law enforcement days. Yeah, so we were out doing that, and I remember my knee was killing me, and then I'll get into that deep into another episode, but ultimately, I think it was like a year and a half, 2 years later, I ended up getting surgery on my knee because of that one thing. But once again, the mindset never stopped going, and Paul Moore, I know, can attest to this, is no matter how big, how large my knee would swell, boom, I was out there running I was trying to kill guys on a run, even with cartilage blowing out of my knee. I was out there trying to just blow guys up on runs and try to, beat all the young guys and everything else and lead by example. So those were some fun days. I'll tell you that, man. It's good to see Paul Moore on here, man. Ox and Dine. Man. Yeah, good dude. I know about all that. Can't keep a leader down from what I'm hearing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know Ox has been through a lot of that too. He was canine handler for quite some time. When I first joined the Richland County Sheriff's Department, it was so funny because as a new guy coming out of the academy, you got to do so many rides before you go out on your own. And one of the very first ones I rode with was Adam Oxendine, who's leaving a message here on the podcast. And man, that's where I first got to know him. And he was a canine handler. So, and I understand what canine handlers go through. So being in the operations division of a law enforcement team and the rigor that you go through, I definitely have seen Ox out there many times, just absolutely exhausted as we're chasing after suspects. So, but yeah, it's definitely good. And of course, as he knows, leading by example, and he was one of the leaders in the canine unit. So he was out there getting after it, just setting the example. So, but yeah, man, it's good to see you guys jumping in on here. This is great. I think I ran this about 4 weeks ago and nobody came on, but then again, my microphone wasn't working. So I didn't find out until after the hour when I watched it back that the entire thing was silent and you just saw me and my mouth moving in the video. So that was about it. But yeah, so like I said, if you didn't catch it from the beginning, I put together the AMA platform beyond the episodes, so that way, if for those that they may watch this, other people may watch this on Restream, but just kind of throw it out there again. I made this for like a multifaceted platform for not only just myself, but for everybody out there that I've interacted with throughout my service, growing up as a kid. So I'm taking all of these things and I'm making like a bio documentary about my own life, I guess, per se. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm not much of a writer. For those that know me, I'm not a big writer. And, I think it was somebody in my family got, like my dad, like a subscription to, I think it was like Storyworth or something like that. And it was like a year-long subscription. And he wrote for an entire year, and it's one of those things where you can get on there on the website and it'll prompt you for questions about your life. So that way, when you write the book, your family members, they can kind of follow your legacy and maybe learn things about you that they didn't know about. So, and like for Stephen and Adam that are on here right now, they don't know each other, but I know those guys and I served with both of them. So it's cool to see different perspectives from people and different parts of your life. So one thing I wanted to be able to do is be able to document this for my kids for when I'm no longer roaming the earth, when, the weeds beat me up and I'm below them, and they can come back and watch and kind of hear about things that, dad did when he was, throughout his life. But at the same time too, there's a lot of experiences that I know that you've been through, the viewers, myself, and a lot of it may not have been in the same context, but it's a shared experience that maybe we can learn from each other. So maybe if there was something that I went through that you might be going through, you might be able to hear like, hey, what worked for me? And it's the opposite. So if you went through something, throw it up there, let's talk about it. And maybe it was something that I may face in the future, or maybe I faced in the past, but maybe went about it a different way. We can come to a common shared experience. So I wanted to kind of document this. Plus, it's also, for me, it's also a healing thing to talk about certain things in certain aspects of my life. There's a lot of things that we've all been through in our lives. And there was a few years that I went through a lot of struggle mentally, and I'll never shy away from that. I'll never shy away from talking about it, because it's one of the things that's kept me going and kept me above the weeds, is talking about it. So, yes, I was in very kinetic type organizations, seen a lot. And if you watch my previous episodes, I believe it was in episode 0 or 1, I talked about a lot of the loss that that I've experienced in my own life. And I know a lot of the guys here that are on right now have experienced as well. But you start to, as life goes on, you start to reflect on a lot of the things that you've did or you've done, whatever the proper grammar is for that. I'm not your grammar teacher. But the one thing I found is to keep you above the weeds is to talk about things, to keep your sanity, to learn from it, learn from others. There's one of the things, so, and Adam can definitely attest to this. So whenever we'd go through to, yeah, exactly, Adam. And Adam knows. So there's a lot of critical incidents, besides the military. Paul Moore definitely knows. I mean, Paul Moore definitely saw his fair share in the military. We all did at some point. For what Adam's talking about is when we were both with Richland County, we've shared a lot of critical incidents. I mean, man, I've seen more death as a uniformed officer than I did in the military. And that's saying a lot, because I did see a lot of death in the military. I saw it in front of me. I had brothers that fell to the left and right. But yet, when you get into law enforcement, it's a totally different animal. And to see what the emotions of what people go through, at the time, you're like, Man, I'm good. I'm good, but after these critical incidents, one good thing about the department is we used to have these sit downs, critical incident debriefs, I guess. And they were, there's a chapter here in South Carolina that forms that. And they would whenever we got into these critical incident moments, and then obviously the aftermath and everybody that was involved with it, we would sit down with these, it was like a mentorship group to where everybody who was involved had a chance to be able to talk about an opportunity or had a chance to talk about the incident from their perspective. So if myself and Adam were on the same incident, and it was pretty traumatic, I'm probably not going to see what Adam saw. And Adam's definitely not going to see what I saw. So, but for us to be able to come together and talk about that was definitely a good healing process. Now, granted, mentally, I was like, yeah, whatever, I don't need to be here. And, I've said that about a lot of things, but it all catches up to you. So, I'd say probably about 4 years ago, I started into a mental health crisis. I started going to see somebody to talk about, because it all catches up to you between the military, contract work, and then law enforcement. Over the years, I mean, just the death, destruction, the critical points, they just weigh down on you. So that proverbial rucksack that you continuously, carry, whether it be the literal rucksack in the military or the proverbial rucksack of the mental strain that you're carrying with you. One thing I learned is you talk through it with people that are like-minded, and man, it's telling you're going to feel like 100% better. And I'm not trying to, promote, going to see a doctor, taking meds or anything like that. I just wanted to be able to put a platform out here. And like I said, it was for a couple of reasons. One, to document my journey through life, but also at the same time, document that for those that I've had those shared experiences with, and some of those that you guys can share with me about different things that maybe you've had something similar. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start the Beyond the Episodes, because it's that way we can get kind of a two-way street going. And I would love to be able to, like I said, throw your questions in there. If you definitely want to come on, I'd love to be able to have you as a guest. I can send you the link when we go live, and that way won't just be hearing Rick talk. It won't just be my ugly mug on your iPhone or computer or wherever you're watching me at, or maybe you're listening, restreamed on Spotify or whatnot. And it's not just me you're listening to. We can kind of interact with each other and talk about it and laugh and share some of those moments that that we thought were either funny or we can gather each other's perspective on what we went through during that time. So that's one of my goals is for this Beyond the Episodes. So like I said, I want to be able to put out the episodes and then we'll kind of talk about them afterwards. But as you saw in this one, we definitely went way beyond the episodes. And this is what it was meant for. And it was, I've touched on stuff I haven't even got to yet. And that was just a little crack. So, Steven and Adam, I definitely appreciate you guys jumping on here and kind of shedding or bringing back some of those memories that I had with both of you guys. And, and that's the whole premise behind this. So, I'm hoping more and more people will start joining each time. I want to be able to hold this. I would love to be able to do this weekly. We'll see. Like I said, I've got a lot of, I got a lot of irons in the fire right now. And like I said, I haven't done these in quite a bit just because I've been busy with the Port Zero cyber solutions company, trying to build my own product. So I just I'm not putting this on the back burner, but in between that, I've been writing different episodes. So like I said, I'm not really a writer. I'll talk into the mic. It'll be like a speech to text type thing. So, and then I got to go back and have ChatGPT edit it or Grammarly. So that way, the commas are in the right place and the periods are in the right place. So, um, you know, but Ox, you'd be hitting up my grammar since you with your doctorate. You'd be killing me. But yeah, I definitely want to keep these going. Um, and I'm definitely I'll be posting it. Like I said, today I posted it around noon because I kind of decided I got stuck in coding. I'm coding this. I'm the worst. That's awesome. I'm coding this product that I'm making. I'm actually like literally coding like in VS Code, and I'm building this product. And man, sometimes your eyes just get crazy going with that. So then I jump over to Notion, which is anybody who doesn't know what Notion is, it's a web-based kind of like a notepad. And and then I write my episodes in there. When I say write the episodes, I'm writing down thoughts about different times, different time frames. So like I said, I'm breaking these down by time, chronological times that I served, and then different units I served in, and then where I went and where I was at during these times. And it's slow going, but like I said, in between working, I'm just kind of, throwing thoughts down on paper, and then I'll kind of rewrite it, and then I'll get on and I'll do the episode. Even though I'm talking like this in the episode, I'll have it up in front of me, but I don't ever follow it. I'll just see like the note that I wrote, and then just kind of wing it from there. So, and just go on a rant like I am now. So those that know me, I love to talk. So, I love that. I'm the worst. But yeah, so, if there's, so like I said, so far we've covered, episode 0 was the why I'm building this. Episode 1 was my journey from 0 to 18. A lot to compact there in an hour. Obviously, you can't cover it all, and that's why I wanted to have these. Episode 2 was basic training, and then kind of some hardships I went through. Not in basic, but it was after. And then episode 3 was Fort Lewis, my first duty station, and then Fort Lewis, Washington. And then episode 4 was Alaska. But yeah, if every time I go through one of these, I just kind of I try to think back to things I didn't cover in the episodes. I know there's a ton because, like I said, I'm putting in stuff that is kind of like on the top of my head, and then I'll start talking about something, and next thing you know, I'm like, oh yeah, that happened as well. And then it was like something, pretty fantastic that I totally forgot about. So, as you get older, as your mind starts going. So, but yeah, I definitely want to keep these up, and I appreciate everybody for coming. Definitely, we're at an hour and 8 right now. I think probably more like at 15 minutes because of my microphone wasn't working for like the first 10. So even though I did all my checks and pre-checks and PCIs and PCCs, isn't that right, Paul Moore? Man, I did all that, and the moment I go live, my microphone just like cut out. So Murphy was out there. And then if Paul Moore, if you're still here, as you'll be able to see, like over this shoulder, you'll be able to see there's our picture, our platoon picture right there. I got that at my office. So, just some of the little swag I've collected over the years. So the shark itself, right there, that's from Italy. The SWAT logo, that's from when I was with the Richland County Sheriff's Department on the SWAT team. That's there from when I was a ranger instructor in Florida. Obviously, that there, Paul Moore knows, that's from when I was at Fort Bragg, 3rd Brigade. And then right there, that's when I was at Foxtrot Company, 51st Infantry, Fun 5-1. So like I said, those next 2 episodes will be from that unit right there. So, yeah, so the 2 new episodes coming up, they'll be about that. And the reason why I broke them down into 2, because it was about 4.5 years of service just to that one unit. And it was so much fun, that it was so much that we did that I got to basically break it down into two segments. So, and we'll talk about that. Funny times, awesome missions, and then and then some sad times, of course. So, and then as you know, if anybody's been following it, Paul Moore just threw it up there. Rangers Lead the Way. What just got over this past weekend? The Best Ranger competition. So if you're watching that, it was awesome. I competed in that in 96 and 98, and I'll be talking about those in the next 2 episodes, because it was that unit there, right there, where I competed in 2 of those competitions. So 96 and 98. So the 14th and 16th annual, and I think they're on, I don't even know what they're on now, like 40th annual. But anyway, I appreciate everybody coming out. I don't want to draw out your night too long. And we definitely want to do this again. Just keep a lookout on Facebook and on YouTube. So I don't know if you're streaming from Facebook or YouTube. That's the 2 that are streaming platforms that I put it on. So either one that you look at, I'll be posting it. Drones compete now. Yeah, I saw that, man. That's crazy. Those things aren't getting tired. But yeah, those are the 2 platforms I've been streaming on. So, both of them I have the channel on, primarily the YouTube channel at Zeroed In Show. And then also on the, I do have a Facebook page for this, but I couldn't stream on it because the restream requirements, you have to have a minimum of 100 followers. So, and I ain't even got half of that. So, but anyway, so Facebook, my regular Facebook page, or YouTube is where you'll be able to find me. So, and whenever I do advertise these videos, they'll be on both those platforms. So you can catch me on any of those. If you definitely want to be on a guest on here, that we can sit here and jaw jack, about different times, let's do it. Let me know, and I'll send you, the next time we set up the AMA, I'll send you the link, and we'll both get on here and we'll kind of talk and reminisce about different times. So some of the great times and some of the not so great times that we had. So, but definitely we can share, talk about some shared experiences and whatnot. So, but once again, I definitely appreciate you guys being here. Thanks for throwing in some comments. Love seeing you guys here. Adam, Steven, awesome. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. You guys were definitely huge in my life. Yeah, definitely Egypt. I totally forgot about that. I'm glad you brought that up. So yeah, we'll talk about Egypt. Egypt, wow, that was crazy time. But but yeah, I appreciate it. So as as usual, my typical sign off: stay aware, stay accountable, stay zeroed in.